Hello and welcome to the Elder Tree podcast. My name is Twiggy Dawn. I'm the founder of the Elder Tree and Alchemilla Herbals, and I reside on Herbal land here in far north Queensland. You are listening to the Herbal Education segment, where each new moon I invite a myriad of plant wisdom keepers to chat about the world of herbal education, about their passions and motivations, and their dreams for the future of herbal medicine education in Australia. This podcast is brought to you by the Elder Tree, a non-for-profit organisation whose mission is putting the medicine in the hands of the people. One of the ways that we are doing this is through this podcast. If you would like to go deeper with the podcast journey while supporting the Elder Tree for as little as $2 per week, then you can become a member of our Patreon. Thanks to all of the people and plants who have helped to make this podcast possible. In this interview, I have a wonderful chat with Jessyca Bosscha, a naturopath, herbalist and herbal educator on Bunjalung country in northern New South Wales. Jess has almost a decade of clinical experience and a deep lived experience of recovery from intense trauma and stress, and is passionate about helping others. As you would likely know, Jess runs the Self-Care with Herbs segment of the Elder Tree podcast, and she really is the perfect person for the job. I love her wisdom and motivation for helping people work with herbs in a deeply restorative and nourishing way. Even just listening to her talk is so calming and grounding. In this conversation, we discuss the importance of herbal education and the gaps that exist in the modern education systems. Jess shares her journey as a teacher and naturopath, highlighting the need for practical skills and hands-on experience with herbs. We discuss the role of Estuary Learning, which is a supportive community for herbal practitioners and herbal educators, in filling the gaps and providing mentorship. We're both very passionate members of Estuary Learning, and I'm very excited to talk about this because we actually have so many people that have been interviewed on the Elder Tree podcast are actually active members of Estuary Learning. And one of the people I forgot to mention is Alison Meyer, who actually was the person that originally invited me to Estuary Learning a few years ago. This conversation also touches on the importance of slowing down the learning process, developing a personal connection with plants, and also the use of adaptogens for stress and burnout. I really hope that you enjoy this interview with my beautiful co-worker, a herbalist and herbal educator that I admire and respect very much. Hi Jess, welcome to the Herbal Education segment of the Elder Tree podcast. How are you going today?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me, Twiggy. I'm really looking forward to having a chat on this segment.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited actually. It's nice to be playing role reversal. You know, you've interviewed me on your beautiful self-care with herbs segment some time ago. So it's nice to be having the other way around, and I'm looking forward to getting to explore a bit about herbal education with you. And I'd love to start off with about just learning a little bit about your past, your journey with herbal education, and what's led you to the point that you're at right now.
Sure, I'd love to share that. I'd love to share, first of all, that I come from a really long line of teachers. So my mum was a teacher, her mum was a teacher, and a lot of my mum's sisters were teachers. So it's kind of a lot of educational lineage in my lineage. And I did study to become a teacher when I was in my 20s, and I did actually work as a high school teacher for a number of years. And following on from that, I worked as a casual teacher for a long time, and anyone who has ever worked as a casual teacher would know that it's a lot of discipline and behavior management and actually not a lot of teaching. So I kind of lost my love of teaching, being in that space for a number of years. But I did still want to be in the education space. And so I moved from teaching in a school environment to working as an environmental educator for a local council, which I enjoyed much more. I was still able to be in the school environment, but I wasn't the authoritative figure at the front. I was the fun one coming in and teaching them different ways about learning about caring for the environment and saving water and electricity in the school environment, in the home. So that's kind of how my journey as a teacher evolved in the early days. Following on from that, I did study naturopathy at Southern Cross up here in the Northern Rivers. And I always knew that I would come back to teaching. So I knew that I always wanted my role as a practitioner to continue to have that educational aspect to it. It's always been a really strong passion to empower and provide knowledge to my clients rather than feeling like they always need to come to me for answers. I love it when it feels like my job is done because they have all of that knowledge and they feel empowered enough to care for their own health that they only need to seek me out if a sort of a big exacerbation occurs. So even though my path kind of deviated from that traditional education sense, I do still feel like I have been an educator for the past 8 or 9 years, working as a naturopath and herbalist. And as the time has passed, I've kind of woven more education into my career as well. I've started offering workshops to the local community in home herbalism. So I've got a herbal first aid series where we've been working through different skills that people can start to build a home herb medicine kit at home so they can start to care for their family's health in that way. So I've really been enjoying kind of moving more into that educational space as my journey in herbal medicine has moved on. So yeah, it's been a journey, but the thread has actually been education throughout the whole journey. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing all of that. And yeah, it's a wonderful thing to get to combine being a practitioner and being a teacher. That's that the underpinning philosophy of like every practitioner should be a teacher and every clinic should be a classroom. And yeah, that it's yeah, it's important. It's empowering. It's empowering to combine the two together. And yeah, but it's wonderful. It's good that you had that foundation before you even came into being a practitioner. It's great you had that teaching foundation to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what are, upon reflection, what are some things that have stood out to you about your herbal education journey?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Twiggy. I really enjoyed my university degree. I studied a Bachelor of Naturopathy through Southern Cross, and I felt I did really enjoy the very scientific, evidence-based kind of approach. I felt really equipped having all of that pathology and biochemistry and all of that behind me, and I felt really confident that I could go out and see clients and feel safe to be able to support them. But as my career has progressed, I've really noticed the gaps in my knowledge from being taught that way, and most of the gaps are all about the practical skills. So there was not a lot of herbal medicine making, herbal medicine growing, all of the basic ways of connecting with herbs. So, when I first came out, my only kind of connection with herbs was through the little brown bottles that every, herbalist or naturopath would have in a dispensary. I'd be dispensing large doses of herbs from brown bottles without really having any idea of what the raw material looked like, what sort of process it underwent to become that liquid medicine that I was dispensing. And so I was really quite detached from the herbs. I really didn't have that strong connection. And I think probably the first spark of, getting to know the herbs a little bit more deeply was planting out a calendula patch. And so calendula grows really beautifully here on the Northern Rivers. It's just this beautiful, bright, golden bloom that comes out in the winter months when we need a little bit of brightness. And it was such a thrill to see all those little flowers coming up and the patch, absolutely thriving, and going out and picking the herbs and, watching more blooms come on as you pick more, because that's how the plant thrives. Started off just drying them on a windowsill. And then, as I started to grow more, I got a dehydrated because I had a few cases of mold getting into my into my herbs, and really wanting to know that they were completely dry. And so from the growing and harvesting the calendula, I then just made a simple herbal infused oil. And that was my first sort of, okay, I can actually make things from the raw material and really start to connect with the plant, know the cycles of growth, and that it's really only an annual here where we live. It doesn't grow perennially. And that, I can make medicine that heals from a plant that I've grown from seed. And that's kind of where I started to really dive into filling those gaps. And I think, like a lot of people who are educated in the university system, I then spent years kind of seeking out different teachers to help me fill the gaps, to now being confident to be able to create a herbal tincture from herbs that I've grown or that I've accessed from wildcrafting, or that I've been able to get from local growers. And my connection with the herbs since creating medicines in that way is so much deeper. And also my respect for the herbs has grown exponentially. When I didn't have an understanding of how much raw material was required to make a herb in a brown bottle, I was dispensing willy-nilly. Have this much, have that much, have this much. And, not really questioning, could I do the same or more with less? And since, recognizing the potency and the vibrancy and the beauty of a handcrafted herbal medicine, I am so much more aware of dosing and how precious that medicine is. And it's really changed the way that I practice.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's something that we definitely share in common, is that, that passion for filling in the gaps in the education. And a lot of people don't have access to teachers like you in their community. So if they are going through the university system, then that's their only education, then yeah, it is a little bit sad if they're not getting exposure, or they're not having the initiative like you did to just go out and I'm just going to grow calendula and just work it
Mm.
out for myself, which is a really beautiful thing, to have that initiative and just work it out, for yourself. But yeah, I definitely had that sadness through uni of not, at two different universities studying herbal medicine and not having either of them even recommend that I grow my own garden, or that I visit a garden, or a community garden, or just that I get active with my hands and all my senses engaged with the plants themselves. And yeah, we were just working with working with dried herb that had been imported from overseas and had lost all of its smell and taste, lost its vibrancy and its potency, long before it landed in our hands. And so, yeah, it was definitely that feeling that something's missing. But yeah, but there
Mm.
is so much beautiful about that degree atmosphere as well, and what can be learnt, like you say, about being able to really understand the pathology and the anatomy and physiology and just the biochemistry, and all of that is really valuable. So it's great, and it feels like there's more and more of us, more and more people stepping up to help fill in the gaps and help teach people. And I get a lot of as I was mentioned to you earlier, I get a lot of I don't get people fresh out of uni come to my workshops, because up where I am there are no unis. So you don't get people in far north Queensland having finished a degree and be fresh out of school or anything like you would down your way. But I do get a lot of people that finished their qualifications quite some time ago, when you could do it online or mostly online. And so yeah, I get a lot of them come along, and some of them been dispensing for decades, and they never knew what calendula felt like. They didn't know about the resin on the flowers.
Yeah.
They didn't
Or
know about
smell. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
smell. And, then having that relationship, developing that relationship with the plant, then getting the feedback later that that was actually increasing their abilities as a practitioner. Like, they could suddenly recognize when a patient needed the calendula more, because they had not just the bond with their patient, they had the bond with the plant, so they were able to more identify when the plant and the patient were actually a fit.
Mm.
Even beyond the the pathology and the anatomy and physiology, they just could see that patterning, could see that um, like the
Yeah.
energetics, or just, when two friends and you're like, oh my God, they would totally get along, and I can't even tell you why, they just would, like, yeah, it's like
Yes.
that. So yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a sad thing, but it's also feels like the things are changing in that area. Would
Mm,
you,
mm,
yeah, do you
mm.
agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And hearing you say, talking about the smell and the taste, and how using your senses is such a great way to connect with a herb, made me remember. I was running a workshop on the weekend and talking about, where to source herbs, and how the best place is, your own garden or your community garden, or if someone has something in excess. But if you are buying something, dried, you really want to use your senses to engage in that herb. If you're buying chamomile from a bulk food store and it's colorless and you can't smell anything, leave that chamomile there. you, know, you do not want to
Mm,
buy a herb that is just, and I think that's an important skill for practitioners to have. As you said, if you don't know what a herb smells like, or feels like, or tastes like in its raw form, it's really difficult to make that connection you were talking about with, okay, this really matches this person that I'm sitting in front of, because there's so much
mhm.
uniformity when you're dispensing out of a brown bottle. You know, everything looks the same, and often they can smell the same as well. So yeah, I think engaging the senses is a really important um, skill to have.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, and having that hands-on connection, just it goes beyond the mind, stepping out of just using the mind, and being able to be with that intuitive element of being a herbalist, the intuitive
Mm,
element of being a healer, and it's kind of, so it's like the university system's wonderful for training the mind, but then there's the undercurrent of
mm,
like intuition and actual connection. The feminine elements of education is kind of like how I see it. It's almost like the
mm,
the university system is training the more mental, and masculine kind of elements of being a practitioner, but then there's all
yeah.
the more feminine elements of intuition,
Mm,
connection.
mm.
um, yeah,
Mm.
so
And I
yeah,
think too, people like practitioners who, practice from that space of not really having much connection, can get really caught up in, oh, but I don't have a big garden and I live in the city and I don't really have the opportunity to connect with the wide range of herbs that I want to be able to dispense. But I think that, you know, first of all, connecting just with one opens the door.
mm-hmm.
You can go and connect with a weed on the roadside, and that kind of opens your door and opens your senses. But it also encourages herbalists, which I think is really important, to forget about having the need for such a wide range of
Yep.
remedies. Like, we're really taught in unis to have this big huge dispensary where there's every herb for every little thing, and I think it can be overwhelming for people to think, oh my goodness, I have to know every single one of those herbs in my dispensary really really well, when actually it's an encouragement to kind of bring it in and let's know a few really well, and those few that have that wide range of applications that can do the things that those 23 others in your dispensary do, get to know those three really well and kind of start from there.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Stephanie Hazel and I are both simplers. Like, it's an old term; it's not used so much anymore. But we're very much into the simple medicine, so the singular, one herb at a time. And yeah, it's yeah, it's really important to develop create an alliance with the plants and really form that bond. I mean, as you know, I run like month long um, for each herb, month-long immersions into each herb, and I learned so much through being in there, and then seeing all the students feedbacks on their connections with that herb over a month. And yeah, there's so much to be said for slowing down our learning experience, and yeah, not just trying to
Mm,
cram in as much as we can and becoming, I suppose,
yes.
like the jack of all trades, or
Yep.
knowing a bit about a lot of plants instead of what about if we know a lot
Mm,
about, yeah, a few, like you say, and really get to know those
yep.
plants really well. And yeah, so yeah, thanks for speaking to that. I think it's an important thing for anyone, when when we're learning, to
Mm,
really be able to be present, to really learn one thing at a time and slow down like that.
yep. Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of spaces emerging that are really addressing those gaps in education. There's kind of soul traders like yourself and myself that doing kind of singular workshops and courses and things like that. But then there's these amazing groups forming. For example, Estuary Learning, that we're both passionate members of. And I wrote a little list before of all the people that we could think of that have been interviewed on this podcast that are members of Estuary Learning. And I got Sally Kingsford Smith, Pat Collins, Caroline Parker, Cassie Hauer, Kat Green, Kaya, Jen Campbell, Deanna Postelou, Brenda Rogers, Jess Allen, and maybe I've missed a couple, I don't know, but we've actually had like quite a strong Estuary Learning
Yes.
presence in this podcast. And for any of the listeners that don't know about Estuary Learning, like Estuary Learning is this incredible non-for-profit organization that's very much focused on education and grassroots herbalism, grassroots holistic healing, and is like an amazing space where practitioners and educators, come together to like empower one another and work together for the greater good. And it's an incredibly uplifting and supportive space, and really helps to kind of get out of the herbal industry mindset and the competitive mindset that can easily get embedded in any business or project, in our modern world. It really brings together that group collaborative coherence. United we stand, and collaborative leadership. There's a lot of really incredible leaders all working alongside in the space. And yeah, it's amazing. We've both been a part of this space for years, and I think you've been a lot more active with it than I have. I'd like to be a lot more active than I am. But yeah, I would love to talk a bit about Estuary Learning and how you feel that Estuary Learning is addressing some of those gaps in education, and just some of the benefits of the Estuary Learning space as well, in your life and in the
Mm,
greater community as well.
thanks, Twiggy. Estuary Learning for me has been, firstly, it's just such a beautiful, welcoming community. Like what you spoke about, there's there's often a sense on online forums of competitiveness, and I'm in my silo and you're in your silo, and there's not a lot of sharing. Whereas this space is really, egos are left at the door, and you can ask. There's no silly questions, so I feel really held by the community. Often being a practitioner is a really lonely space, and there's not a lot of kind of interaction. But Estuary Learning's really filled that gap for me. In that's one of the real benefits for me. And in terms of support for clinical practice, there's such a wealth of knowledge. There's so many people who have been in the natural health space for such a long time and have experiences way beyond mine. So being able to pop in and say, hey, I've got this client that blah, 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 what would you think? And this mind explosion of all these amazing skilled practitioners piping up with, oh, this homeopathic remedy might work, or this, have you thought about this herb, or this flower essence might be a really beautiful support for this person. So that's one area that it's been a really beautiful, held, supportive space for me. But also what I love is that there's so many opportunities for learning. So we spoke about, the gaps that we find in our learning when we've been through the university system, and how, it often takes us years to individually source, ways to fill those gaps. And Estuary's really working on filling those gaps. So one of the ways that I find is really helpful is we have a monthly gathering where somebody presents a case, and then everybody who's listening who has, wisdom to add can then pipe in and say, oh, this person might benefit from this. Have you thought about that? And these are all recorded. So there's this backlog of amazing knowledge. And, you might come across a similar case and go, oh, that's right. There's that mind meld. And, everyone spoke about that. So I love that. The name of it really is a melding. When you experience one, it's just this firing of all this knowledge, and it all goes into the pot, and what comes out is just beautiful. So that's kind of a way that members benefit. And we also hold lots of events throughout the year that are very educational. So there's an annual gathering where there's lots of educational opportunities, but also members are encouraged, if they have skills to share, to provide learning opportunities for the other members. So, for example, we had an event recently where one of Kaya, who has been interviewed on this podcast, is wonderful at creating beautiful herbal topical applications. And has a pharmacy background, so she has really in-depth knowledge in all sorts of things around topical applications. And so we were able to learn from her different ways of using herbs topically. So that's kind of, it's the membership is very broad, so there's a really wide range of skills. There's lots of educators within the membership, and the vision is to provide short courses that can fill some of those gaps that we were talking about. And it's often the lost arts, so things like homeopathy or iridology or herbal medicine making, maceration, or all sorts of things that we know are missing from the model that is currently in place. Like, there's not really anywhere at the moment where you can gain that full suite. So Estuary's aiming to fill a lot of those gaps with the beautiful knowledge from our members.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's such a diverse space. There's collectively so much wisdom, and so many different backgrounds and age groups, and but it's definitely a very empowering space. I really love that one time that you invited me on to do a little tour of my apothecary. That was a lot of fun, and it was also at the point was like a bit of a kind of, I suppose, like a step up or a growth point for me, of like having, being kind of revealed to this group of people that I feel, I have a lot of admiration and respect for, and then kind of inviting them all together into my apothecary is like, oh gosh, okay, got a a growth point. And I feel like for a lot of people it is a space that provides a lot of growth points. And because it can be hard when everyone's just kind of trucking it out by themselves, and Australia is a really big country, and we can get quite isolated. So it's great to have this space. And Kaya's workshop was great. I went to that. There's so many amazing
Very
people in there.
talented.
Actually, like the last two events, I went to Herb Fest, and Kat Kat Green was there, obviously, because
Mm.
she runs Herb Fest. So is Cassie Hauer and Kaya, and it's like this contingency from Estuary Learning. And then at the Wise Women's Conference, we had Pat Collins and Sally Kingsford Smith was there, and myself and Cassie Hauer as well. And there's just such a sense of pride of like, oh, we're part of something together, like we're part of this
Yes.
community together. And it really creates a sense of kinship. And it's nice. It's not just like arriving to a space and being like, oh, I'm Tatiana and I'm Alchemilla Herbals and whatever,
Yes.
self-centered, kind of presenting myself to the world. It's like, oh, look, I'm here and I'm part of something, obviously part
Yeah.
of the elder
Yeah.
tree as well, but we're focusing on Estuary Learning right
Yes.
now. But yeah, it is amazing just to be able to be a part of something and working together with other people for a greater good. So I really love it. I love being a part of it, and I love your involvement with it. And there's so many aspects to it too, because there's also like there's the events, like you say, there's the workshops, there's the newsletter, which we've both written for, I believe.
Yeah.
And
Yep. And a magazine. Yeah.
the magazine, and
Yeah.
there's so many
Yeah.
parts to it. So
Mm.
but yeah, to get to work and walk alongside, such respected elders like Pat and Sally, and
Mm.
mentorship is a really big part of the frame, the vision, and the movement of the Estuary Learning is like providing a space for that mentorship, because
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
hard to have that kind of one-on-one or the smaller group thing in the university setting or the advanced diploma
Mm.
setting. It's things are really a lot more
Mm.
dispersed and impersonal. So
Mm.
it
I
feels a
think
lot more
that's one of the
personal.
gaps, isn't
Mm.
it? That's one of the gaps, kind of being, whoa, thrown out and there's no one there to catch me. But, if you
Mhm.
knew that you left university and you had a month-long mentoring ship, as you grew your wings and started to fly, how much more comfortable would that feel, leaving your learning environment to then be caught by this beautiful mentor who then,
Mm.
helped you along your way and, Mm.
Yeah, and that's what, as that's what we intend to. That's what we're going to be creating with the elder tree once we have the sanctuary, is having the internship, so having the in-person representation, I suppose, of
Mm.
the Estuary Learning space. In that way, having internships so that people can buffer, like be preparing to leave uni, or maybe straight after leaving uni, they're not just kind of left kind of going like, I'm not ready, because like I tell you what, I am yet
Yeah.
to meet a student that has left uni, and maybe you have, I don't know, but I have never in my life spoken to a naturopathic or herbal medicine student that's left uni going, yep, I'm ready. I'm like, I
I'm
feel
going to nail
like
this.
I've got this. It's more like there's a mantra they're trying to tell themselves they're ready. They're like, I'm ready. I'm ready. I've got this. Breathe. But
Little
I
wings
pretty much
flapping, but not
just,
quite long enough yet.
but I've pretty much just had a mental breakdown, especially in the last year of school. So I don't know if I'm actually emotionally and mentally ready for this.
Yeah.
So there's so much support within that space that's not being offered, and so that's great. Like Estuary Learning and communities like this can buffer that, so that it doesn't have to feel
Mm.
like this lacking space. It's like, oh, you can do university and also have the support of these
Mm.
spaces and people, so it's good. We're filling in the gaps. It's happening.
Mm.
And it's and I feel like it's
Yes.
actually starting to
Yeah.
happen more rapidly. I feel like there's this real acceleration going on, which is really exciting to
Mm.
be a part of.
Mm.
So
Mm.
yeah,
And
it's
so
exciting.
nice for future practitioners coming out to know that these things are happening and there's support available, and
Yeah.
you're not just pushed off the edge with your little wings flapping madly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, there are all the professional associations like ANTER and ATMS and NHAA, and I don't want to discredit all of the work that they do and what they've held for a long time and the support that they offer. And so that's all, just to validate that as well, that is really important, all of the work that they're doing. But there's just something that's more intimate and personal and grassroots feeling about the Estuary Learning for me. So so I'm really enjoying the space and enjoying being part of it with
Mm.
you. I just wanted
Yes.
to talk a bit about I did just kind of mention something there about how most people I don't know if I've met anyone who hasn't left uni feeling already burnt out before they enter into practice. Like most people in that setting, unless they're really academically minded and not a parent, and like they're yeah, most people, it's quite a stressful environment. Just the sheer a fast pace and the intensity of the learning environment can often leaves people feeling quite depleted, adrenal burnout, just too much screen time as well. Just the sheer like screen time element of
Mhm.
it all. That alone is just, enough to, have people feeling disconnected, burnt out, stressed, all of
Mm.
that stuff. So I know that both, it's another passion that you and I both share, is around working with herbs for burnout, for stress, for insomnia, for, a mental, emotional wellness. So yeah, I just want to kind of like open up the space. If there's anything around that you feel like to share with our listeners, that they might learn from, in what you carry around how to work with herbs in those kind of settings, whether they're
Mm.
a student at uni or whether they're just anyone,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that what I'd love to chat about is the herbal class called adaptogens. And they're kind of become a bit of a poster child for stress and burnout. Um, but first of all, what is an adaptogen? So it's kind of in the name, adaptogen, adapt. They help us to adapt physically, mentally, and emotionally to stress. But the problem with adaptogens is as they've sort of become more on the radar and a little bit more mainstream, they've been used in a way that can actually promote burnout. So rather than providing the support that they so beautifully do, they're often used in a way that just encourages someone to continue pushing through. So they start to get that false energy and a little bit like they start to feel a little bit better and they think, oh, yeah, I think I can keep going, rather than using the beautiful shifts that adaptogens can create to have a really good look at how they got to this space and making some changes to ensure that they don't go down the path of burnout. So I'm really passionate about making sure that if I'm prescribing an adaptogen, I'm saying to someone, this herb is not going to do all the work for you. You need to meet this herb halfway. I'm not giving you this herb so that you can keep going in the way that you've been going, that's leading you down this path where you're feeling exhausted, emotionally triggered, stressed, not sleeping well. I want you to have a look at your lifestyle and I'm going to help you find some ways that you can change so that this herb can do its best work rather
Mhm.
than allowing you to continue down the path that you were going down. And one of my favorite adaptogens is Withania or ashwagandha. I'm lucky enough to be able to grow Withania here. And it's a real labor of love. It takes a long time to come to maturity. And my heart always breaks a little bit when I'm working with root medicines because I have to sacrifice the whole plant
Yeah,
to use
yeah.
the medicine. So I'm very conscious of how precious this medicine is. And I actually started off with one Withania plant and then harvested some berries, and I didn't actually harvest the root until I was confident that those little seedlings were going to continue on my mother plant's legacy. But Withania is a beautiful herb. As I said, it's a root medicine. If you've ever smelt the root, it's said to smell like a horse. And then that translates into it's supposed to give you the vitality and vigor of a stallion. so, so really working on gently lifting vitality, which is um, a kind of common theme with most adaptogens. the reason that I love Withania so much is that I often see clients who are really well matched to this herb. So it's really well indicated for somebody who has that wired but tired picture. So, waking up in the morning and just go, 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 go all day, but having that deep underlying exhaustion under it all because they're running on stress hormones rather than having that true grounded energy. So the way that I really like to work with Withania is, I encourage people to really tune in and notice after taking Withania for a little while how the energy feels like it's changing. So rather than having that buzzy, buzzy, buzzy cortisol energy where they're just go, 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 can't sit still, because if they sit still, that exhaustion seeps through and they kind of fall in a heap. But when after using an adaptogen like Withania for a little while, they can really start to notice that shift where the energy is coming from that deep well within. And it's actually a true energy, and they actually are waking up feeling vital, and they're not falling in a heap if they do allow themselves to stop. So I encourage my clients and people that I work with to really tune in and notice that shift, because that shift signals that they're starting to have a shift in themselves where they can start to feel a little bit more motivated and more settled and more calm and safe to be able to make some changes in their life and have a really true look at what's kind of brought themselves to that place where they've landed in my apothecary seeking support. So that's kind of how I really like to work with adaptogens. It's a class of medicines that I teach in my upcoming course, Restore Your Nervous System, where we talk a lot about herbs for the nervous system. But adaptogens are one that I'm really quite passionate about, helping people to use them safely rather than pushing them further down towards burnout and allowing that frenetic energy to continue.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love what you say about meeting the herb halfway. Yeah, and that whole, yeah, I call it like enabling. I really don't like giving a herb to someone. Like, for example, I don't like giving a lung herb to someone who's just won't look at this, stopping smoking or reducing their dairy intake or addressing the emotional elements or whatever it is. Like, if someone's like, look, I don't want to look at that, I don't want to do any of that, I just give me the herb to, and then you're just entering into the whole allopathic model of just suppressing the symptoms so they can continue making the bad choices that got them there in the first place. So yeah, so I like, thanks for shining light on that. And yeah, just with Withania as well, is there any particular times that you would say that Withania is particularly well indicated, or any times that you would recommend not to take Withania?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I really like Withania. It's an iron-rich herb, so often, when I'm seeing someone who's that picture that I was talking about that is wired but tired, um, it it they can have a bit of an anemic picture as well. Often, digestion is a little bit compromised, so they're not absorbing iron well from their food. Maybe their hormones are a little bit out, so they're bleeding more than they should be, and that kind of results in a bit of a low iron picture. So that's another time that I would really reach for Withania, when there's kind of that iron deficiency picture, and often that person will kind of have a bit of a pale complexion, and they might actually, sitting on my chair is quite difficult for them. They're not able to sit still very well, or if the other side, they can just be at the point where if they sit down, they find it difficult to get back up. And in terms of when I wouldn't use Withania, I think the main one is what you just spoke about, Twiggy, where if I was really speaking to someone and it was really clear to me that they just wanted a quick fix and they weren't willing to make the changes that were necessary to help them to move out of the space that they'd found themselves in, I'd be pretty reluctant to prescribe any adaptogen, really. because it would, as you say, it would be enabling them to continue on in the way that they'd been going. And I'd probably be more likely to reach for something like a nervine, that was going to help them feel a little bit less stressed and more calm, and maybe have more space in their head to kind of make some healthy choices, rather than working on, lifting vitality and enabling them to continue on, in that stressed state. I'd probably be looking at, how can we allow this person to have the headspace to really, feel calm, enough to, all those scattered thoughts to start to dissipate a little bit, so that they have some clarity and can really, lean into making some good choices.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for sharing about adaptogens, in particular about withania. So what else, what other plants do you work with and recommend for helping with stress and burnout and yeah, all the difficulties, facing the difficulties of life?
Yeah. Yes. In the interest of keeping it simple and, kind of, getting to know one herb well, I'd really like to share. I really love to work with nervines, when I'm working with someone who's in a stress state. And nervines are a beautiful class of herbs that are really helpful for, helping us to feel calmer, and less triggered, and more emotionally resilient. And one of the herbs that I
Mhm.
really love to work with in the nervine space is oats. Oats, I really love when somebody's feeling really hypervigilant. So, a lot of mums, or, people in general, when they're feeling stressed, can get into that state where they're just constantly scanning and checking for the next danger or what has to happen next. And it's just an exhausting state to be in. And it often is accompanied by that real sense of feeling overwhelmed all the time, and kind of operating from that. The baseline is really quite high, so that if something is to happen, the trigger doesn't match the response. So, rather than responding to, a child, yelling, like a child yelling, we're responding to a child yelling like it's a lion attacking us. Our stress response is much more exaggerated than, what the trigger is. And I like to, kind of describe oats as a nice warm bowl of porridge for the nervous system. It's a tonic herb as well, so it's super nourishing. It's really grounding, and it just helps us to feel really calm. And it's really beautiful. I really love to, use oats in an overnight infusion. So because it's a tonic herb, lots of its, beautiful constituents come out well in an overnight infusion, like a longer infusion where we kind of put the herbs into the hot water and allow it to steep overnight. And it's really lovely combined with something like nettle. So nettle and oats together, I really love in an overnight infusion. It's kind of like a herbal multivitamin almost, and incorporating the nervous system as well. So it's just that beautiful kind of really all round, combination, that if someone is feeling really triggered, overwhelmed, hypervigilant, their digestive system isn't going to be working very well, because they're in a state of fight or
Mm.
flight, and their body's saying, hey, it's not time to stop and digest my food. All of my energy is going into my extremities. So they're more than likely going to be lacking some things because they're not absorbing from their food. So if we're putting together something like nettle and oats into an overnight infusion, we're helping them to feel a lot more grounded in their nervous system, but we're also giving them a little bit of a boost, in terms of their vitality, by putting in some beautiful nutrients and minerals from the nettle as well. So that's kind of one that I really like to work with when someone's feeling, in that really triggered, overwhelmed, hypervigilant state.
Mm. So when you say oats, are you talking about the oat grain or the milky oats or the oat straw, or what part of the plant
Yeah, I
are
love
you
to
working with?
I love to work with all of them, Twiggy. I love all of oats. So when we're making the overnight infusion, it's the oat straw, the dried oat straw that we'd
Mhm.
use. And I also like working with the milky oats. I find milky oats to be a particularly special remedy with all of those properties that I just spoke about, but kind of magnified. Like it's just this really potent, beautiful, nourishing remedy for the nervous system.
Mm.
In a liquid
Nice.
form, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I find, I've heard people talk about when they take milky oats in a drop dose as a tincture, it's almost like they can feel the sizzle of the nerves kinda just like, unwinding, like on a hot road. And it's just like, down we go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's wonderful. It's, I mean, to be honest, like oats is just out of the nervines because I think like out of all of the classes of actions of herbs, nervines is probably the one that I work with the most because it's the one that I need the most. And I seem to draw people to me that really need herbs, nervine herbs. And I'm looking out over my garden now, and it's just like all the Lamiaceae mint family. Nervines, all the motherwort and the lemon balm and the skullcap
Mm,
and all the mints, the peppermints and all just that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. And but yeah, the oats is like possibly because I don't have confidence that it would grow in my climate. But
mm,
yeah, I just haven't really I've heard so many great things about it being used as that plant being worked with for as a nervine, but I haven't really had direct experience. So you're inspiring me to want to do that. And also just for our listeners that might not know the difference between like oats, what we eat in porridge, which is like the fully developed grain seed that's been generally rolled, flattened, processed. Or then there's the oat straw, which is like kind of like the grass, because oat is all grains is like a grass, and so it's like the grassy foliage, I suppose, of the plant. And then the milky oats is when they harvest it's my understanding is like when the flower's been fertilized, but it hasn't, and it's full of this white liquid, and it's hasn't yet formed a grain. So I think it's, yeah, is that, am I getting that right? That's what the milky
yeah,
oats is, right?
yep,
And sometimes
yeah,
people
yeah.
actually almost like poppies, they can actually like harvest the milk out of the oats,
Yeah,
and
the
that's like
latex.
that's the
Yes,
gold. Yeah,
yes.
that's the real bit. But then I suppose for the sake of a tincture, they harvest the whole heads of the flower, of these
Yeah,
flower
yeah.
heads that have been fertilized. And yeah, it's the whole thing just feels really lush to me, and I'm actually a little bit excited to be able to dive
Mm.
dive into it a bit
Mm,
more. So
and
yeah.
I think, my experience, like, I've been lucky enough to, use a handcrafted, oats milky oats tincture,
Mm.
and it was harvested at the point where the latex was running, so they were able to capture that beautiful milky part of the oats, into the tincture,
Mm.
which is just magical. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wow. Yeah, like so many people, they're taking their medicines, or they know of the medicines, they see them in books, and they don't really have like an actual idea of what that, like the moment when something is harvested, like what part of the plant is being used, like you mentioned
Mm,
with Ania or ashwagandha, that it's the root. I mean, other parts are used, but it's most commonly, at least in Western medicine, it's most commonly the root. It's like how many people actually know that, and know that, for a root, a root medicine, you have to actually essentially kill the plant to, to get to harvest the
mm,
medicine, and the sensitivity around that.
mm,
And, there's just always
yes.
so much to learn, even
Mm,
for herbalists that have learned for many years,
mm,
it's like we're
mm.
always at the, no, I'm not going to say we're at the beginning of our journey. We're just always on the learning journey, together.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's always
absolutely.
great to have, yeah.
Yeah, that's another, thing that I'm quite passionate about too, Twiggy, when you spoke about, people not understanding that, some herbs are root crops, so it requires sacrificing the whole plant for the harvest to happen, I had someone say to me the other day, "Oh, slippery elm's so hard to get now." And I said, "Did you know that slippery elm's actually, almost extinct? It's a very endangered herb, and that's the reason why, that herb is so difficult to come by. It's
Mm.
and I'm passionate about, providing awareness around, even just root herbs. It's if they're not easily grown and we're harvesting the whole plant, it's a no-brainer that, we have to be careful about our use of that plant, and look
Mm.
for alternatives where possible. So, yeah, I was saying, okay, marshmallow is a really nice alternative to
Yeah.
cereal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I recommend like marshmallow root and psyllium husk as the
Mm,
kind of getting both of them, or plantain slash and psyllium husk, but all parts of plantain and
yes.
the marshmallow root. So
Mhm.
yeah, that is a
Yeah.
factor. A lot of people don't realize that about the slippery elm, that it is the
Mhm.
wild stands are being depleted because any plant where you harvest the bark, if you don't know
Yes.
how to harvest the bark and you ring bark the plant, you kill the tree.
You kill the plant.
So
Mm.
yeah. So yeah, that's a real so something, there's always just so much education to be had and awareness, and and slippery elm is really difficult to propagate, to domesticate
Mm.
and grow. So
Mm.
yeah, and tree medicines always take longer as well, to establish and grow, and so yeah, we just got to kind of work with what's on hand, and
Mm.
it's always I think better if we can source it from at least within Australia, if not from our gardens and our friends' gardens and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah, that's
absolutely.
much more ideal, I think.
Mm.
So I just want to I feel like we could just kind of spend a long time on this topic, and there's so much to be learned. And actually, for any of our listeners, I'm sure that our listeners have heard your segment, that are listening to this right now. But if I know that in your segment you pretty much go into this whole topic a lot. Working with herbs for resilience, and for just for nourishment, and taking care of yourself, and stress reduction, and buffering all the difficulties of life with the helps of our herbal allies. So for anyone that hasn't already listened to your segment, I definitely recommend everyone jumps over there.
Thanks, Twiggy.
But I just want to kind of move on a little bit there and just talk a little bit about what's going on at the moment in your offerings, with your herbal education offerings.
Sure.
Like what you're doing now, and also what's in the pipeline. Yeah, what's going
Mm.
on?
Thanks, Twiggy. So, as I mentioned before, I've got a bit of a herbal first aid workshop series happening. So, we started with herbal oils and balms, and the next in the series was herbal syrups and gummies, which I'll be running a couple more times. And then I'm looking at doing things like herbal electuaries, so with honeys, making beautiful remedies out of honey. So, that's kind of
Mm.
my local herbal first aid workshops that I'm doing. Excuse me. And then coming up, I've just recently finished running a beautiful in person circle with some local women, doing a course over 5 weeks, which I called Restore Your Nervous System, which was all about first of all, learning about the nervous system, and, how our stress response works, and how, often stress is impacting so many different areas of our lives without us even realizing. And when we can kind of start to peel back the layers on the stress without even addressing those other health issues, those things start to resolve as well. So we talked about that. And we talked about a lot about food, because that's a really big part of my practice as well. I really believe that how we nourish ourselves has a really big part in our health. So we talked a lot about food and nourishing ourselves, and common deficiencies that arise as a result of stress, and how we can kind of be a little bit proactive and fill those gaps with our diet so that we're not as at risk of those deficiencies. Obviously, we talked a lot about the gut and the brain and the connection between those two, and foods and herbs that can help to nourish the gut to promote that really lovely interconnection between the gut and the brain. And then we spend a lot of time getting to know a few herbs from the nervine and adaptogen class really well. And I'm really passionate about helping people to connect with those herbs in a way that makes sense to them. So rather than going a lot into the biochemistry, I do touch on the biochemistry, but talking a lot about how, ways that herb might work for you, and in what situation, so that people can really start to get to know the herbs well, feel confident leaning on those. And also, encouraging people. We're going to be doing some basics of herbal tea blending, because I think that's a really lovely way for people to connect with herbs. We talked about using the senses. If you're making a cup of tea, you're using your sense of smell. If you're tasting a cup of tea, you're using your sense of taste. You're looking at the herb as you make the cup of tea. So you're really understanding, is this a vibrant source of this herb? And then we're also going to be doing some herbal syrup making, which is another really beautiful kind of home herbalism tool to have, so that people, they know the herb, they know that they can connect with the herb in perhaps this circumstance, and then they have that beautiful tool of how to create beautiful medicines for themselves and their families, to help support the stress response, because we know that, chronic stress has such a big impact on all areas of our health, and if it's allowed to continue, it really sets us up for chronic health in our future. So that's something that I'll be releasing as an online version in September. September 5th is when we start, and it'll be a 6-week online live calls with recordings available as well.
Beautiful. Well, I'll definitely, for our listeners that might be scrambling for their phones or notepads right now, it's in the show notes of this interview. So just look below and you can see the link to Jess's offerings, and for that 6-week offering, online offering. So yeah, good on you for stepping into the online teaching space, because there are so many people that don't have access to, there's actually like so many people that enroll in the university degrees purely because they want to learn herbal medicine and don't have anyone to learn it from. They don't even necessarily want to be practitioners. They just want to, they've maybe had their own health scare or their own health issues, or they want to be able to take care of their family better, and essentially they just want to be home herbalists. They don't need this whole big degree just to get to the end goal that they're needing to. And so I'm loving the emerging online herbal offerings that have been coming up in Australia over the past year in particular, and I'm really stoked and proud that you're stepping into that space and bringing your really valuable and unique offerings out to the broader Australian community. So that's it's amazing. It's great. And it also takes a lot of work, a lot of computer time, a lot of thinking and planning, and you don't get to have that beautiful hands-on embodied tactile thing with a group, with that yummy space. So I find as a teacher, it's a real sacrifice, like, stepping into the online, because I've been doing that this year, stepping into that online learning space. And it's like, it feels like a bit of a sacrifice. It's like, okay, I've got to do this for the greater good.
Yes,
But
yes.
definitely,
You know what I love though, Twiggy? Like with my in-person circles, we've been creating this beautiful online community where we're kind of touching base frequently, motivating each other, because I think I spoke about this a lot in the circle, that, if you feel like you're celebrating the small wins, if you're celebrating and being applauded for your small wins and everyone's celebrating with you, it's so motivating to be able to continue with the changes that we know are necessary. And I've really watched those ripples flow in my online community, just from the face-to-face version, where we've created an online community and we're kind of applauding one another and, congratulating each other on those small wins. And that's, creating that beautiful momentum that continues.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I've been doing actually the same thing up here as well with the online community. Yeah, it's great. It's great. This ripple effect of everyone, motivating and inspiring and empowering one another, and cheering each other on, and filling in the gaps for each other, being like, oh, I do it this way, and then someone being like, oh wow, you could do it that way. I didn't even think about that. And so we just become so much better when we've got each other,
I agree. Yeah.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of our chat for now. But yeah, is there anything we haven't talked about, or anything in particular you'd really like to share with the listeners? Yeah, that you'd like to share.
Not really, but I just would like to reiterate that, it doesn't connecting with herbs doesn't have to be complicated. Don't let your fear of having to know everything get in the way of just making that first small step. Go to your
Mm,
local nursery, go to your community garden, ask someone if they've got a cutting or a seed, and just plant one thing on your windowsill
mhm.
and just watch it grow and make a cup of tea from it, or enjoy its beautiful flower, or just you don't let your fear of having to know everything get in the way. Start simple.
Mm, beautiful, simple and slow herbalism. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, beautiful. Thank you so much, Jess, for coming on here and sharing your beautiful wisdom with our listeners. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to have a chat with you today.
thanks, Twiggy. I've really enjoyed it too.
Thank you so much for listening to the Herbal Education segment of the Elder Tree podcast. Stay tuned every new moon as I interview more wise and inspiring herbal educators and herbal lore keepers from around Australia. If you would like to go deeper with the podcast journey, you can become a member of the Elder Tree Trove on Patreon. Contribute as little as $2 per week to access free content from our interviewees, and also access discount codes and opportunities which are exclusive to our members. You can find us on Patreon by going to www.patreon.com/The Elder Tree. Other ways that you can assist us in getting our offerings out there to more people in Australia is by subscribing and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and on the Spotify app. Also, liking, commenting on and sharing our social media posts actually has a really positive impact and helps us to reach further with the message from all of the amazing herbal lore keepers that we interview on this podcast. Thank you so much for your support and have a most wonderful day.
If we